Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's event. Thank you all for being here. I'm Gary Sukanek, President and CEO of 717 Credit Union, and I also have the privilege of chairing the Regional Chambers Governmental Affairs Council. I'd like to introduce the rest of the council members who are here today. Would you please stand and be recognized? We have other Governmental Affairs Council members. And I also want to relay Tom Humphrey's regrets that he couldn't be with us. He's attending a regional, or rather a Board of Regents meeting in Columbus. So we miss Tom today. Following today's presentation, as Guy told you, there will be a question and answer period. We encourage you to write down your questions on the cards, and chamber employees will be around to collect those. Today we have the privilege of hearing from Ohio's Attorney General, Mike DeWine, who began his political service career as the prosecutor in Greene County in 1976. The Attorney General has served the citizens of Ohio in many other capacities, including the Ohio State Senate. He was a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Ohio Lieutenant Governor, and the U.S. Senate. One thing that he has stressed throughout his career has been he's had a focus on youth, and as Attorney General, he created the Crimes Against Children Unit, which helps identify, arrest, and prosecute sexual predators. He's also worked to improve our school safety by increasing training opportunities for law enforcement and educators, as well as fighting human trafficking and child abuse. And as citizens of Trumbull and Mahoning counties, we can all thank him for allocating $75 million to help demolish abandoned and blighted properties, which we've all had, has an effect in our neighborhoods. So we need to thank him for that. And he's taken action on Ohio's prescription drug abuse and heroin problems. Some of the other positive things he's done with the legal system in Ohio is to increase the number of criminal prosecutions for consumer fraud, and he has dramatically decreased the turnaround time for testing of DNA evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ohio's Attorney General, Mike DeWine.
Thank you very much. Well, let me first apologize for being late. The one thing I can always count on in the Mahoning Valley is good food, so I hope someone saves me some of that over there. Seriously, I tell people there's more great restaurants in the Mahoning Valley than any place else in the state of Ohio, and it's always fun to be here. Last week for the presidential debate, there was a reception, and I looked up. It looked like half of the Mahoning Valley was coming in. Chamber had a bus, and people came out, and I think it's the right thing to do. It's an opportunity. This is an opportunity not just for Cleveland with this convention coming up, but it's an opportunity for the Mahoning Valley and other parts of the state to really kind of showcase Ohio. And anyway, it was good to see so many of you there, and so many of you who rode the bus over. I've got a great job. About 2 weeks after I was first sworn in, about 4.5 years ago, I came home one night and said to Fran, and Fran, I've been married now 48 years, so she knows me pretty well. Anyway, I came home and I said, I just love this job. I love it because there's a crisis every single day. I said, sometimes there's a crisis every hour. And she looked at me and just shook her head. She says, you are sick. You are just crazy. Why does anybody want to do that? But anyway, she's been there with me all these years. Many of you have seen her over here campaigning. Attorney General, just give me a quick what an Attorney General does in the state of Ohio, because they're all different. All 50 states, jurisdiction is different. First of all, I'm the lawyer for the state of Ohio. So that not only means the legislature, the governor, not only defending laws that are challenged by people who say they're unconstitutional, not only giving legal advice to all state agencies, but also, we're the lawyer for Youngstown State. We're the lawyer for every state university. So got about 450 lawyers, one of the biggest law firms in the state of Ohio. Second big component of our office is the crime lab. All the things that you see on CSI, all the things you see on NCIS, all the different alphabet crime shows you see on TV, we do. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. You want to be one of my, you want to be a victim? Very good. He's a victim. That's in this way. Okay. We had one case where a guy was assaulting a woman. Can't like to be a woman. Close your eyes. Okay. And what the guy was doing is he was holding her eyelids shut. He left. She never saw him, but we were able to catch him. How? Because we got the assailant's DNA off the victim's eyelids. Good job. Good job. Good job. So it's just absolutely amazing what the team can do. When I became Attorney General, we were having some problems with, and I'll get to that in just a moment. The other things we do is Medicaid fraud. We spend a huge part of the state budget every year on Medicaid, doing some wonderful things for some wonderful people. But when you spend billions of dollars, there's people who want a certain percentage of people who want to commit fraud. And so we have a unit that specifically deals with that. We do the collections for the state. The state of Ohio has, anybody owes money to the state of Ohio, we're the ones who are calling you up and trying to get money from you. We started something right after I became Attorney General, and that we run out of our Youngstown office, Mahoning Valley office. We were able to employ more people over here because we now do not only collections for the state, but any local governmental entity, an auditor's office, clerk of court's office that wants us to collect for them, we can do that. And we run that for the whole state of Ohio right here in the Mahoning Valley. So it's been very, very exciting and it's worked very well. As you just heard, we have a Crimes Against Children unit that I set up when I became Attorney General. You may have seen in the news in Austintown the individual who was arrested. That was a joint effort between our Crimes Against Children unit and the Austintown Police Department and the Sheriff's Office and other local police departments. We focus in the crimes against children, particularly on the sexual assaults of children or the file sharing, what they call file sharing of child pornography. And it's just, I won't go into those details, but it's just a horrible, horrible thing, and we're making some progress there. One of the things that I learned throughout my career, and I've had many different jobs, as you know, in government, but one of the things that I've come to the conclusion that one of the most important things an elected official can do is to determine and set the right culture for the organization. It's no different than if you happen to be the president of Youngstown State, or no different if you're a CEO in your company. You set the culture. Somebody at the top is making the decision about the culture, and then you try to drive that down through your organization. It's particularly tough, I think, in government. Someone becomes president, someone becomes governor, someone becomes attorney general, and you already have a huge number of people who work there, and they're going to be working there long after you're gone. And so it's difficult sometimes to change the culture, but you can do it, and I think it's vitally, vitally important. When I became Attorney General, I looked at the culture at our state crime lab, a place called BCI. And as I said, we do amazing, amazing work there. So the culture always was, we do good work, but the other part was not stated, but it was also true. The rest of the culture was, and we're not in a very big hurry about it. If a rape had occurred somewhere in the valley, the day I became Attorney General, that evidence would have been taken to our crime lab. Unknown DNA. Let's say it was a rape case. Let's say it was a stranger rape. Those cases, when I was a county prosecuting attorney, we usually couldn't ever catch the guy. We'd never find out who did it, which makes it particularly bad because these individuals are usually serial rapists. Today, we have the ability to retrieve their DNA. It's put in a rape kit. A woman goes to a hospital, she's treated, she's helped. If she consents, you can get evidence from their clothing and from her body. You take that evidence, that unknown DNA from the assailant, and you go into a national DNA database with 13 million known and unknown DNA profiles, and you get a hit, or you don't get a hit. The day I took office, if that DNA evidence was brought in, that unknown DNA evidence was brought into our crime lab, there would have been a wait before they ever got to it of 125 days. We've changed the culture, and I won't go into all the details of how we have done it, but I'll just tell you one thing we did. We brought in some business people. We brought in Cintas, the uniform people, down in Cincinnati area. You may say, what do they know about running a crime lab? Well, the answer is probably nothing, but they know about production. Those of you who are in manufacturing, those of you who run a business, you know about efficiency, you know about production. And one of the things that they did in this project is have our scientists come in a room about half this size, I guess, and start charting out how the evidence was processed from the time it comes in until the time it goes out the door. They just charted it out. No one had seen the whole picture. Everybody did their own part. Found out there was 187 steps for evidence by the time it came in the door and by the time the report went back to the police department. Within a week, they changed it. They reduced it from 187 to 80. Pride in the organization. It used to be when we would do a crime scene, we would send a truck out. It was an unmarked truck. I said, no, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to put BCI on there because I want the BCI employees who are at home at night and watching TV and see a crime scene and see that it's our truck there and that we take pride in that. Bottom line, today, in the last 4.5 years, we've had a 4-fold increase of DNA. We're doing 4 times as much DNA work every week as we did the day I took office. Despite that, we've gone from 125 days wait to an average of 22 days wait. And we can turn cases around in 24 hours. A little girl a few months ago in Columbus, Ohio, standing in front of her bus stop, 6:30 in the morning, parents' worst nightmare, some guy comes up and abducts her and rapes her. Our people saw that on TV because they live in the Columbus area, and the ones who work in London. We also have a crime lab in Richfield. We have one also in Bowling Green. The next day, they called up the Columbus Police Department and said, did you get a rape kit on the little girl? And they said, yeah. Our people said, bring it in. They brought in, we ran it around the clock, 25 hours, went in the national DNA base with this unknown, got a match, called Columbus back and said, here's your guy, and here's his address, and 3 hours later, they had the guy picked up. That's why it's important. And I tell the story, I brag a little bit, but I tell it mostly, though, to talk about culture. Because I really think as we look at where we go as a state and we look at what we have to do in the future, we need to focus on culture. I knew that was a problem when I became Attorney General. Now, one thing I didn't know was about all these old rape kits that were sitting around in police departments around the state. We thought there were a few hundred. And so I sent a letter out to every police department. And understand, we work for the police in a sense. I mean, they're our customers. And so I have no ability to, make anybody bring evidence to us. They bring us the evidence, we process it, and we give them the results, and we work as really as a team. But I felt we needed to get these rape kits in. And so I said, look, the protocol is, and I actually had a group do this, come up with a protocol. And they came back and said the protocol for a rape kit is that they should always be tested unless there was no crime. No crime would be a woman reports rape. 2 days later, she says it was consensual. That doesn't happen very often, by the way. But occasionally that does happen. In that case, you would not want to have the guy's DNA in the National DNA Database. But they came back with that protocol. I wrote to every police department in the state, and I said, bring us these old rape kits. And I thought we were going to get a few hundred in. Fast forward to this week, we have now received 10,600 old rape kits. Some as old as 18, 19, 20 years. Cold cases. If you see the TV shows, these are the ultimate cold cases. I felt they would have probative value, but even I was shocked at what's happened. Over 10,000. We've now tested 8,000, 8,100. We are consistently, week after week, getting matches or hits on 37%. So we're going back to police departments and telling them, this 18-year-old case, okay, you better get the file out because we got your rapist. And then they have to, of course, put the case together. About 4,400 of these 10,000 came from the city of Cleveland alone. You had some in the valley, but certainly not anywhere near that at all. In Cuyahoga County, they've already indicted 350 people. About every week, we stop somebody. We pick up someone who with a new warrant, or we stop them from coming out of prison. Many times they're in prison, then we find 4 more rapes, and the indictment comes down. So it's been a very, very good program. We're very, very proud of it. I'm proud of our folks who do this every single day. We owe it to the public because these people are serial rapists. And what you find is, if you find a guy, then you'll find he's in 3, 4, 5 times. Sometimes you're only dealing with 5 or 6 unknowns. You still don't know who the guy is, but you know that 3 or 4 police departments have the same case. And so you can go back to those police departments and tell them, hey, go back, work together because you've got the same guy. So the good news is we've done that, and we're going to be the first state in the union to do all the old rape kits. But the bad news is we should have done it before as a state. And I don't know what happened. I'm not putting blame on anyone, but the important thing is that we get it done now. But imagine if you were a woman victim, you've been raped, you go to a hospital, and they tell you, hey, if you'll consent to giving us your clothes and other evidence, that we might be able to find this guy. And then you find out a few years later that it was never even tested. So we're going back to these individuals, these victims, and I think we owed it to them. So it's been something that's been very, very, very successful. Consumer fraud. You're sitting home at night, and your granddaughter calls, Sarah calls you, and she starts to cry and talks to grandfather, granddad, whatever she calls you, I'm in trouble. And it's not your granddaughter at all. It's a scam artist. Tonight in Ohio, I will guarantee you, there'll be someone who falls for that. What these con artists do is they now have a long reach and a long arm. We've always had crooks. We've always had bad people, a certain percentage of society, I suppose. But today, they've got the internet, and they've got long-distance calling. And they can sit in a foreign country and go right into your home and rip you off. The grandparent scam is a huge one. And the way it works is they tell you they're in trouble. Where are you? I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Well, Sarah, what are you doing there? Or I thought you were at Youngstown State, or I thought you were at Ohio University. Don't tell mom and dad. That's always the second thing they say. And the third thing is wire me money. And if that doesn't work, they put the second person on the phone who pretends to be the police officer, usually a gruff male voice, and says that your granddaughter Sarah or whatever is down here and you can bond her out for such and such, and if you wire the money here, you can get that done. On and on and on. A lot of the job, I think, of the Attorney General is to warn people about these scams, because a lot of them we can't frankly solve. Some we do. We got one guy who had ripped people off for over 10 years. He gave himself his name of Bobby Thompson. Wasn't his real name. He went up on he went out and hired a direct phone company, telephone company, and to make direct solicitations. And he said he formed a group he called U.S. Navy Vets. And of course, you can imagine the stories when you picked up the phone and you hear about the money going to the vets, coming back from Iraq or coming back from Afghanistan. The only trouble was he didn't give the money to the vets. He kept the money himself. We think he was at least in Ohio, $7 or $8 million ripped off people. He did it in 45, 46 states. We finally caught him out in the West Coast. U.S. Marshal Pete Elliott caught him for us out there. We sent two of our BCI agents out there to try to get search warrants. They searched his storage place where he had his things stored and found two bags. One bag had cash of almost $1 million in cash. The other bag had, I think, 15 different disguises. So these crooks are out there. The con artists are out there. If you're on the internet, be careful. If you're selling something or buying something on the internet, be very, very careful about that. Let me conclude by talking about a couple other things, and then just open up for your questions. We have a heroin epidemic in the state. It is everywhere. It's as likely to be in our small communities as it is in our cities. It's as likely to be a middle-class person as it is someone who has lower income, and it's as likely to be someone who has a lot of income. It just doesn't seem to matter. What has happened? Well, there's been a big change. I think we don't do a very good job, not only in this state, we don't do a very good job in this country in education. There used to be, when I was a county prosecuting attorney way back in the 1970s, there was a kind of a barrier there that people would not try heroin. I mean, we could arrest people, and after you're a prosecutor for a while, and you got a mid-sized county, you start to get to know some of the same people that keep coming through the door, and you start talking to them. You say, okay, what kind of drugs do you do? And so you go through the laundry list of drugs, and they're telling you they're doing about everything. You get to heroin in those days, and they go like, hey, I'm not crazy, DeWine. I'm not going to take heroin. Those are people over there that do that. They're crazy people. They put that stuff in their vein. I'm not going to do that. For some reason, that barrier is gone. It's just gone. The other thing that is the problem is that the Mexican drug cartels have got a great business model. They sell it very cheaply. First of all, they grow it now in Mexico, grow the poppies in Mexico, process it down there, ship it across the border. I mean, they do the whole route and bring it up into Ohio, into our major cities, Ohio and Pennsylvania and other places. And then it goes out from there. If you knew where to call right now, if you had a number, they might not deliver it to the restaurant, but they might. I don't know. But for $15, you can get heroin delivered as cheaply as you can get a pizza, and as easily as a pizza. So they've got a product that is highly addictive, horribly addictive. I mean, just talking to people who've been heroin addicts is just horror stories, and the parents who have lost kids. It's highly addictive. It's cheap to start with, but it gets real expensive after a while. Doctors will tell you that an early-stage alcoholic might drink the equivalent in alcohol of a six-pack of beer a day. Late-stage alcoholic might drink a case of beer a day. So you got a 4-to-1 ratio. Early-stage heroin addict versus late-stage heroin addict couldn't be as high a ratio as 100-to-1. So that guy or woman in the late stages is 100 times. So instead of $15, it's $1,500 a day. 90%, I would say, of the crime that occurs in the state of Ohio, and the Valley is certainly included, comes from people who need to break into your house and steal money so that they can survive that day and get their hit. After a while, it becomes no longer are they interested. The purpose is no longer to get high. The purpose is to be normal and function. It's a horrible, horrible situation. We set up a heroin unit in my office. We just had a few weeks ago in the Valley, in conjunction with the Mahoning Valley Law Enforcement Task Force and our heroin unit, a major bust. I can't talk about what we do or what we bring to the table. It's very law enforcement sensitive, but we bring to local law enforcement something they don't have, and it's a capability to get higher up on that food chain of people who are the drug dealers. Let me just stop. Let me mention one more thing on heroin. We do that, but I'll tell you, we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. We're going to do what we can do. governor's not going to solve the problem. The Attorney General's not going to solve it. The President's not going to solve it. It's going to have to be solved, if it's going to be solved at all, in our local communities. The places where I've seen in Ohio that have fought back and made some progress in regard to the drug problem have been communities where there's been a grassroots effort that has just sprung up, literally. And it's sprung up usually by moms and dads who have lost kids. And they lead that, and they take that sorrow and that agony that is their life every day, and they try to channel it into something so that kids will not have to, other families will not have to go through that. We have people in my office, and this is the final point. They are available to you. They're available to whatever community you live in. If you want to start a program, maybe you already have a program. Maybe you're well on the way to doing that. And if you do, God bless you, and it's the right thing to do. But we have to do a better job with education and prevention. Law enforcement's important. Treatment's very important. But we got to stop it before it actually starts. And that's the only way to do it. So we have people who will come out, who I have hired, frankly, out of these grassroots groups. They come to my office, they work in my office, or they work out of their home, and they work with counties around the state and communities around the state. So they're there to be of help, and I would just invite you to utilize them, because I think that's the best thing, frankly, that we can do, and the most effective thing that we can do. Let me just open it up for your questions.
I have several questions about the Responsible Ohio Marijuana Amendment that just made the ballot.
Yep, let me do that quick.
Comment
Yep,
on that.
I'm against it.
In particular, what issue trumps the other one in terms of the anti-monopoly and Responsible Ohio?
Yeah, I guess okay.
I use the word Trump in the question.
Yeah, I got a little nervous about that too, Doc. So I you know, a little sensitive here, a little sensitive here. Two reasons that I hope people vote no. And if you don't believe anything I say, tonight go online and start looking at what's going on in Colorado. Look at other states that are using now recreational marijuana, because this is recreational use of marijuana, is what this ballot initiative says. Here's what I think you're going to find, at least what we found when we looked at what's happening in Colorado. The number of children who are taken to an emergency room because they ingested marijuana went up dramatically. I'm talking about little kids. Why? Well, because they don't just smoke marijuana, they bake it. They put it in brownies. They put it in cookies. And a kid gets hold of that, has no clue what it is. There's a brownie there. And there's no quality control about the amount, anything else. So a kid could ingest a whole lot of that. So the emergency room visits are up. Number of people who are charged with driving while under the influence of marijuana has shot up as well. They tell me, I'm seeing statistics on it, but they tell me that the first use of marijuana is going down in age. I would also say that we know a lot more today than we knew in the 60s or the 70s about marijuana. We know a lot more about the brain. I'm not a doctor, but I will tell you what doctors have said and written, and that is the brain continues to develop much longer than we think it does. And if somebody is using a significant amount of marijuana when they're young, their brain is developing, that is really just not a very, very good thing. So take a look at that. Look at what other states are doing. If you think that recreational use of marijuana in Ohio is just a dandy idea after you do all that, okay. I would suggest that the way it's being done in Ohio is really not a very good idea, even if you're for it. This ballot initiative says designates 10 very specific spots in the state of Ohio where marijuana can be grown. 10. 10 different groups put up $2 million apiece for this issue to get it passed. So you're going to be seeing, if you haven't already seen them, commercials are coming our way. With $20 million, I can tell you, you can buy a lot of TV in the state of Ohio, and they're going to have very persuasive arguments. Why did people put $2 million apiece up for this? Is it because they think marijuana is a wonderful thing and they want everyone to have it and share this? Well, maybe or maybe not. I think the more likely explanation is that they want to make a whole bunch of money, because the 10 places listed on the ballot are in fact today owned by these 10 different groups. Pretty sweet deal. They put the money up, they get you to vote for it, and then they sit back and reap the money forever, I guess. So I'm against it. That's my explanation. The one thing that's going to get people very, very confused, if it's on the ballot, is an initiative that's been put forward by the General Assembly to have another provision which basically outlaws these monopolistic issues on the ballot. So both of them could conceivably pass. I can't tell you what's going to happen after that, because it's...
Oh, okay. If one gets a higher vote, that doesn't trump the other.
Well, there's an argument that it does. Okay. There is an argument that it does, yeah. There's an argument. But there's also an argument that it doesn't.
Okay. So
I mean, you know, we're going to have all our 450 lawyers dealing with it, you know, so... Anyway,
we don't know.
we don't know. And anybody tells you they really know for sure, they can guess and give you an educated guess, but we don't really know. The one thing I do know is it will be in court. It will be in court if they both pass. Who else?
Are there funds available through your office that charitable organizations can apply for?
The answer is a qualified yes. We sometimes will have settlements where a company has done something wrong, an individual has done something wrong, and the Attorney General is awarded X number of dollars to use for, let's say there was something that was designed for seniors, and the court in a civil suit ordered that whoever was ripping off the seniors pay money. That money might go to the Attorney General's office, and we would designate that money for charitable groups and give that money out. Some of the money is restricted. It can only be used for veterans. It can only be used for seniors or something. Some of it has no strings on it. It's a relatively small amount of money. Let me introduce Michelle Gilchrist, who is back there. She's substituting for Lizzie today, right? Lizzie, who is the rep in this area. Michelle is out of our Cleveland office. But if anybody's wants to know anything about that, see Michelle afterwards. We do have money. It's not a lot, but we do have some.
Do you expect body cameras to become a required piece of equipment for police officers in the near future?
Well, if anyone, let me say this. The tragedy that occurred in Cincinnati a couple weeks ago is a pretty good argument for body cameras. You all familiar with the case? Some of you are, some of you aren't familiar with it. But Cincinnati, University of Cincinnati police, sworn police, have a memorandum of understanding with the city that they can go beyond for certain purposes, they can go beyond their jurisdiction of the campus. An officer there made a stop outside. It ends up that the guy who's driving the car is shot by the officer. Officer's story is that he was being drugged by the car, and he had to shoot him to save his life. That apparently, and this is not our case, by the way, I'm just getting this secondhand. Second police officer basically says the same thing. Body camera would appear, certainly, to show just the opposite. That he walked up and ended up and shot the guy in the head, and it would appear that there was not provocation or that there was not justification. A jury will end up making that decision. But the body camera provided that information that never would have been known. I was guarantee you, this individual has been indicted, again, not by us. This was a Hamilton County prosecutor, Joe Dieters. But for that body camera, there would have been no indictment. I guarantee you that, because all you would have had is the officers' stories, and there would have been nothing else. So I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure to have body cameras. They do cost money, and there is no statewide uniform protocol of when you turn them on and when you turn them off. You can imagine scenarios that, and then the question is going to be, is everything from a body camera available for the news media, the TV stations to get? Just think about all the places a police officer goes and all the times that he or she would turn that on. So all of these things are going to have to be worked out somehow. But in the end, I think you're going to see a lot more body cameras out there. So, who else?
Two-part question. With the increase in heroin, as well as crime increases to purchase drugs, why would the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy look to reduce the number of police academies from approximately 60 to just 10 or 12? And would this not reduce the pool of available cadets for hire and replacement?
Yeah. First of all, I don't think the Ohio Police Officer Training Academy is contemplated doing that. I got to give you a little history of this, though. When Ferguson occurred, and when the Walmart shooting that occurred in my home county in Xenia, Ohio, occurred, and shooting in Cleveland, I don't have to tell you what has been on the news every night. I looked at it and said, what can I do? And that's kind of how I approach this job, bluntly. Where can we be value added? If we can be value added, let's go do it. If we can't be value added, let somebody else do it because they're already doing it. I said the one thing that we should focus on, I think our office can focus on, is police training. Every investigation we've ever done in the Attorney General's office, and we only get involved when police ask us to come in, but take, for example, the high-speed chase in Cleveland a few years ago. You all ultimately get down, if the case goes to a grand jury, you ultimately get down to the question, was the police officer acting reasonably under the circumstances? And to determine reasonableness, one of the things you look at is the training of that police officer. So you always have to look at the training of the police officer. The second reason was, under our office, we have within our office is housed a place called the Ohio Police Officer Training Academy and the Ohio Police Officer Training Commission. They set, for example, the criteria of what courses police officers need to take to become police officers. I said, I want to take a fresh look at this. I want people who've not looked at this before. And so I put a group together of about 16 people. And I picked them with help from people around the state. It was a very diverse group. I think seven were African Americans in the group. We had one Hispanic. We had some people who had police backgrounds, some who had police training backgrounds, some who were ministers, some who were community leaders, and charged them, go take a fresh look at police training in the state of Ohio. They came back, and I'm going to shorten this, but they came back and basically said Ohio is not up to par with what other states are doing. They said in 3 areas we need more training. Number one, in no particular order, 3 things. Number one, more training for police officers to help police officers identify someone who has a mental health problem and then help them understand what they do, depending on the nature of the problem, to de-escalate the situation. A lot of cops get killed every year, and a lot of civilians get killed every year when there's a confrontation, family calls someone, calls the police, 30-year-old son is off his meds, and the family's scared of him, but it ends up he's dead by the time the whole thing is over with. So we think we can save lives by doing that. Number one was that. Number two was big picture police-community relations, which can mean many, many things. One of the things, our group came back, and I just let them do what they were going to do. I put Reggie Wilkinson, who I know very well, who used to be head of the Ohio prison system, African-American, PhD, phenomenal guy. He ran it. We got people from all over the state to be part of it. One of the things that they said we should look at is intrinsic prejudice, which is basically the people who study this will tell you all of us are prejudiced. We all have our biases. You just need to understand what those biases are, so you kind of, as you evaluate the situation, you understand what that bias is that you have. And it's not all about race. It's about many, many things. So that's two. Number three is scenario-based training. Scenario-based training is simply training that would occur in as close to real-world situation as possible, so that the officer's heart is beating, adrenaline's running, and this is all things are happening. And you train that officer how to react, life or death situations. Need more training in those areas. We are now working to implement that. The legislature said we should have 11 more hours of let me back up. Ohio now only requires 4 hours of continuing training every year for every police officer. The gold standard is 40. Kentucky's at 40. Okay? Kentucky's at 40, Ohio's at 4. We need to be closer to the 40. Legislature came back and said, okay, next year we'll go from 4 to 11, and the year after that we'll go to 20. So we're heading in the right direction. My office is now figuring out how to put all this together. The question had to do with not the continuing training, which is done by our office and done other places, but the initial training to become a police officer. To become a police officer in the state of Ohio today, you have to have 605 hours, and you have to pass a test, statewide test. There are roughly 65 police academies in the state. Some are very, very good. Some are not very good. If you look at, and we've got this information in our office, anybody wants to go on our webpage or call us, we can give it to you. Some academies are producing graduates who are only 1 out of every 3 are passing the state test. That's a problem. So that's the problem that we have to look at as a state. How do we deal with that? And I think what the commission is going to come up with is they're going to raise the standards. They're not going to say any academy can't exist. Everybody can exist, but you have to meet the standards. And we're going to take the standards up. And if anybody doesn't meet the standards, they're not going to be able to do that. That's as short answer as I can give on that. One more, I guess.
In the past couple of weeks, Mahoning County has had approximately 6 highway traffic deaths. A recent news report states electronic devices were part of the cause. Are there any new laws in the works to stop their usage?
Look, I'm not in the General Assembly. One of the things I've always focused on is highway safety. Did that when I was in the United States Senate. This is something the legislature would have to pass. And so, I would just urge you to contact your legislators and say, look, we need to do whatever you think they need to do. But it's not my jurisdiction, but I care a lot about it. And it does matter an awful lot.
I have one more. How do you see the field of candidates, including yourself,
I knew we took one too many questions, didn't we?
shaping up for the next governor's?
Oh, the next governor's race. I thought we were talking about the presidential race. Okay. Well, I'll answer the one you didn't ask. I'm for John Kasich for president, so that's. I think the governor's done very well. Did well in the debate. It's going to be very interesting to see. It's the first time I think in Doc Benning and I talk politics all the time, and I think Doc, the first time in our memory that we really didn't have a real front runner or anyone whose quote turn it was. Democrats and Republicans are different. Democrats go fight, and then after the fight, it's okay, and then they move on. Republicans sort of have a hard time getting over the fights, and so we don't like to have fights. And so usually there's a front runner, and usually by the time the dust settles, it's the front runner. I don't think there's anybody who's a front runner in this presidential race. I think this thing is wide open, and I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. As far as the governor's race, I'll give you a little history. In 1989, Mike DeWine, George Voinovich, and Bob Taft all ran for governor. I know most of you missed that race, or at least the part about Mike DeWine. But we all were in the race for governor. I was in the U.S. House of Representatives then, and didn't take me too long to figure out with Taft and Voinovich. DeWine was kind of the third guy on that list. And the governor asked me, future governor, Voinovich, asked me to join as lieutenant governor, and after a lot of soul searching, I did that. And then Bob Taft went on to be Secretary of State, and then of course governor. So, I have a real interest in that, but this is not the time or the place. Let me just, I will leave you with one thought, though. One of the challenges we face in this state is to make sure that every child has a shot at the American dream. That's not income redistribution, none of that. It's saying that our focus should be on all the kids, and that includes the kids who, have every opportunity, but it should also include the kids who don't have every opportunity. And there's some interesting things that are going on in the state, with some things that schools are doing, some things that businesses are doing. I think to provide that opportunity, I'm going to talk more later about it, but not today. But to provide that opportunity, it can't just be the schools. The business community has to be directly involved in that. I'll just let go at that. Thank you all very much. Again, apologize for being late. I'll be around if anyone wants to talk or ask any other questions. Thanks a lot.